Hello, it's Dave Gibson again from Third Wednesday Magazine. Tonight with a new writer who makes his home in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, Jake Botz. Jake has a new book out that he's going to tell you about and do some reading from. And so without further ado, here is Jake Botz.
Thanks, David, for having me, and thanks, Third Wednesday, for picking up what was one of my first published stories, a story that is in my first book, which is called Your Place in This World. In fact, the Third Wednesday story is called Your Place in This World. It's the title track of the book. So the first half of this book is a novella, and it's about this kid named Steve, whose dad, Ernie, is a junkie. Steve grows up in the projects in Chicago, and at this point in the book, he's at kind of an impasse in his life. He's in his early 20s. He's tried a lot of things out in his life, trying to sort of find a way for himself, and he discovered music and later literature. He had a girlfriend that told him he should write stories about his life, and he did. But right now in the story, his dad's in the pen. His girlfriend left him, and a mentor of his, this unusual blues man named Diggy Nubbit, just died. So this is where we're at. The chapter's called Obituary Writer. I popped my quarters in a Sun-Times box and snatched out 2 copies. That was the Ernie in me. Every year since he went away it got a little better, but taking more than my share still came as natural as breathing. At Chester's, I ordered coffee and a bowl of rice and gravy, leaving the extra paper on the counter to atone for my earniness. I rarely looked at a paper unless there was nothing else to read, but that day, June 3rd, 1990, I read every word on every page. I needed to take my time getting to Diggy's obituary. I already knew what it would say since I wrote it, but I wanted to see it in print, a sense of finality maybe, or vanity. I'd never seen my words published before. In either case, I hoped wherever she was, Carrie would see it too. It was the Sunday paper, so it took me a while getting there. News, op-eds, sports, and entertainment all went in one eyeball and out the other. Nothing landed but the 3 cups of coffee I downed on my way to the obits. Carrie used to say I used coffee to self-medicate depression. I'll admit I like coffee about as much as she liked dope, but I never heard anyone dying from a coffee OD. The actor Rex Harrison from Dr. Dolittle had died the same day as Diggy. Sir Reginald Rex Harrison, a leading man with urbane wit, dies at 82, the headline said. There must have been a half page on him. As I read about Rex, I thought about the 5 short paragraphs I had put together on Diggy. Some of the info was regurgitated from the liner notes on back of his only recorded album, but most came from little things he disclosed to me over the years, like his belief in the healing powers of petunias, his ability to teach a cockroach to sing, and the fact that he had only 1 testicle. I didn't mention that his brutal father had beaten the nut off him with a switch. That seemed too gory for the general public. When I reached the bottom of the obituary section, I found a heavily redacted version of the piece I'd sent in. I flipped a page thinking it might continue, but it didn't. There was no headline, no photo. Nothing there about how Diggy got his nickname from working as a gravedigger his whole life, or how his music was too sad even for the blues, or how he let a 15-year-old white boy named Steve Bardo live with him in the Patrick Sullivan Senior Projects at Madison and Ashland for the entire winter of 1983. All that remained were a few simple facts. Alonzo Diggy Nubbit, Delta bluesman who performed regularly at the Maxwell Street Market, dies at 75. I was surprised to read, though, that there would be a memorial service that afternoon at A.A. Rayner & Sons Funeral Home. I couldn't imagine who would have put that together. Needing to cleanse my palate after the stunted obit, I ordered more coffee and moved on to the classifieds. Though I hadn't planned on doing so, I began searching for a new job. Anything was better than the box fan factory where I'd been working the past 6 months. Assembly line, bartender, delivery, demolition laborer, experienced obituary writer. I got excited by the last one, figuring at least technically I did have experience. I ripped the ad from the paper and went to the toilet, letting a quart of coffee go from my bladder. When I checked the big industrial clock on the diner's back wall, I saw it was just 2 hours until Diggy's memorial. I stopped at my place and changed into a junk store blazer and a pair of wingtips before taking the L to the south side. When I arrived at A.A. Rayner & Sons, I walked into the vestibule and stood snacking on a bowl of caramel set out on an end table, waiting politely for someone to escort me in. 10 minutes later, and still no sign of life, I entered the main room, but there was no one there either. No greeter, no music, not even any chairs set up. I found Diggy, though. He was in a corner, laid out in an open casket, his face covered in pancake makeup like a silent film actor. I imagined him suddenly opening his eyes and flapping his lips to the tinkle of a player piano, communicating via subtitles that rolled on the bottom of the box. "May I help you?" came a soft voice from behind. I turned and saw an attractive, well-dressed young black woman. I'm going to skip ahead a couple pages. So he meets this woman, Shirley, who's the funeral director, and immediately has a crush on her. So this is now after the burial. Though I left the cemetery vowing never to forget the great blues man, I mostly thought about Shirley Goodrich on the northbound L ride home. Sitting on the train, chomping A.A. Rayner's caramels, I pulled the classified clipping from my wallet. Writing obituaries, I figured, would put me in the same general field of work as Shirley. The next morning, I gathered my short story notebooks to prove I was a writer and went to apply for the obituary job. When I entered the office of the Avondale Gazette, a small brick storefront near Belmont in Milwaukee, I found two people working busily in a narrow room, an old woman wearing an out-of-date wig on one side and a middle-aged man at a typewriter on the other. "I'm here for the job," I said. The two lifted their heads simultaneously, gave me the once-over, and quickly returned to whatever they were doing. Without eyeballing me again, the woman reached her big knuckles toward a door at the back of the room and rapped hard. A bald man in his 70s came out, splashing coughing out of a mug. "Who are you?" he asked. "Steve Bardo, obituary writer," I said, as confidently as possible. "Mówisz po polsku?" I shook my head. "Spanish?" "Poquito," I said. "We print in 3 languages for 7 neighborhoods," the old man barked. The cheap wig woman, now on the phone, covered the mouthpiece and rasped, "Everything's translated by the other office, and you know it, Aloysius." "But the kid's gotta make his calls," the old man countered. "It isn't 1947. People speak English at funeral homes, Al," she said. "The job pays shit," typewriter guy interjected without looking up. "Give him the sheet, see how he does," Al said, spilling more coffee and disappearing into the back room. The woman who introduced herself as Dolores sighed. "Here's the sheet. Find out who kicked the bucket, who's left, and where the party is. Keep the bio short and sweet." Then, waving a long, bony finger at my t-shirt and jeans, added, "Show up tomorrow in slacks and a button shirt. Al doesn't like casual attire." In the most cluttered area of the office, directly adjacent to the bathroom, I began unburdening the sole unoccupied desk of fake plants, hardened jars of rubber cement, and broken staplers. The chair, which I reluctantly sat on, was 4 inches too short for the desk, as if a person with incredibly short legs and long torso had once manned that particularly sad station. Slightly disappointed at getting the job so easily, I stuffed my notebooks in a drawer and picked up The Sheet, a barely legible laminated page that looked like it was from 1947. When I glanced back at Dolores, she was staring in my direction, making a dialing motion in the air with her right pointer finger and a pinky thumb phone with her left. I waited a minute, imagining she might do other feats like trapped in a box or walking in the wind. But when I didn't immediately follow her pantomimed instructions, she only wrinkled her already deeply wrinkled brow and snuffed at me. As I started calling around, it became clear many of the numbers listed on the sheet, 12 funeral parlors, 21 old folks' homes, and the Cook County morgue, had been changed or were no longer in service. When someone did pick up, I introduced myself as Steve Bardo, obituary writer for the Avondale Gazette. But gathering information was difficult. The people on the other end either didn't want to be bothered or else cracked bizarre jokes about their recent dead. An hour later, reviewing my notes, I wondered how to keep the 5 obituaries I'd been tasked with writing from sounding the same. I searched the desk hoping to find an obituary template or something, but there was no instructions, nothing to show how to do it. Before I could give it another thought, my phone rang. It was Dolores. She was less than 10 feet away, so it was a little awkward, but I went along with it just the same. "Turn it over," she rasped like a film noir femme fatale. With the phone cradled at my ear, I flipped the sheet over and found a numbered list of tasks. 1. Clean entire office. Toilet. 2. Sweep, shovel, sidewalk. 3. Maintain Xerox. 4. Miscellaneous errands. 5. Do not make coffee. Dolores only. "Okay," I said. "Start by emptying the wastebaskets, then come get this package from my desk," she ordered. After dropping Dolores' package at the post office, I decided to take an early lunch. At a nearby diner called Bobak's, I ate a bowl of borscht while studying a Chicago Tribune left on the counter, memorizing Death Notice jargon like "departed her earthly body," "ended a long battle with," and "the bereaved will gather." None of the obituaries offered any genuine insight into a person, the actual ups and downs of their lives. It was depressing. After an hour of 1,000ing along with the greasy clock behind the grill, contemplating whether or not to go back to the office, I ordered a 5th cup of coffee. The waitress, rather than returning with the carafe, slid a check under my cup with a tightness of lip that suggested I had surpassed Bobak's refill point. Equally tight of lip, I flipped the check over and began scribbling out an obituary for the time I had killed sitting at her counter. More of an assisted suicide than murder, I decided, and left it by the register along with my last $3. After a long, boring battle with seconds, Mr. 59 longhand minutes passed away peacefully at Bobak's not-so-bottomless cup restaurant. The deceased is survived by his grieving widow, Mrs. Shorthand Minutes, nay hours, and their 4 children, day, week, month, and year. The bereaved will gather below the industrial wall clock at the Avondale Gazette. "I don't have a typewriter," I announced when I got back. Dolores frowned and pointed toward the basement door. I felt disappointed that she didn't mime walking downstairs or call me on the desk phone to whisper secret instructions. Opening the basement door, I was overcome with a heavy waft of mold. The frayed string that switched on the basement's lone bare bulb snapped as I yanked it, an obvious metaphor for the decline of my mental faculties since taking a job at the Avondale Gazette. There in the semi-dark, sifting through mounds of broken things, I found a couple of ancient typing machines that were clearly not meant for modern fingers. When I re-emerged empty-handed, the middle-aged man who rarely took a break from typing, snatched a key off a corkboard and unlocked a closet full of office supplies. After handing me a modern-ish electric typewriter, he introduced himself as Herb and went back to clacking noisily on his own machine. An hour later, he squeaked his wheelie chair behind me and peered over my shoulder. "ASDF JKL semicolon," he said, addressing my single-finger typing technique. "Your grammar's shit," he added, opening a file cabinet and tossing a massive book called The Manual of Style in front of me. Not wanting to seem ungrateful, I pretend read the book for several minutes. At the end of the day, I took the 5 obituaries I had typed and offered them to Dolores, who I assumed was in charge of things. "'Less you're bringing coffee and Danish, don't drop nothing on my desk," she said dismissively. Without taking his eyes off the page in front of him, Herb waved me over. He thumbed through my obits for all of 5 seconds and then shot me a sideways glance. "Done any writing before, kid?" he asked. I smiled and pulled the notebooks from my desk. So I'll stop there. That's about halfway through that chapter. That's probably enough for our session. And I just want to say thanks again for having me, and thanks out there for whoever's listening. You can pick up the book, Your Place in This World, April 14th. It comes out this year, 2026, Cornerstone Press.
Thank you, Jake Botz, for a very entertaining reading. Once again, this is Dave Simpson for Third Wednesday Magazine. Until next time, goodbye.